The offering. The crystalline spires of the Nixian Central Embassy gleamed like frozen flames against the purple sky of Centauri Prime. Commander Sarah Chen stood at rigid attention, her Earth Defense Force dress uniform feeling unusually restrictive as she watched the procession approach. The Nixian diplomats glided forward, their iridescent robes catching the light of 3 setting suns, but it was their gift that caught and held her attention. The empath walked with impossible grace despite the ceremonial bonds that wrapped her wrists in strands of liquid metal. Her skin held the characteristic shimmer of her species, like starlight captured beneath frost, but there was a darkness in her silver eyes that spoke of carefully contained defiance. Commander Chen, High Minister Vaxil's voice carried the musical undertones typical of his species. We present you with Thera, one of our most gifted empaths. Consider her a symbol of our eternal alliance with Earth. Sarah's jaw clenched, the muscles working beneath her skin. 6 months of diplomatic training hadn't prepared her for this moment. She'd known about the Nixian tradition of gifting empaths to forge political bonds, but facing it in person made her stomach turn. Minister, she kept her voice steady, professional. Earth appreciates the gesture. However, I must be clear about something. She took a step forward, breaking protocol. The Nixian guards tensed, their crystalline armor chiming softly. On Earth, we have a different word for sentient beings given as property. We call it slavery. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Vaxil's outer membrane flickered with patterns of displeasure. Commander, surely you understand this is a sacred tradition. Thera has been trained since birth for this honor. Sarah's eyes met Thera's. In that brief moment, something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. The empath's ability to read emotions would tell her exactly what Sarah felt about this sacred tradition. Minister, I accept Thera's presence as part of our diplomatic arrangement. Sarah chose her words carefully. But she will be treated as a free citizen under Earth law while in my custody. Those are my terms. The Nixian diplomats erupted in whispered conversations, their skin patterns flashing in agitation. Vaxil raised a hand, silencing them. You risk much, Commander. This is not the human way we have come to expect. Then perhaps you don't know humans as well as you think, Sarah replied. She turned to Thera, whose expression remained carefully neutral. Would you prefer to stay here or come with me, knowing you'll be free to make your own choices? The chamber fell silent. In all the centuries of this tradition, no one had ever asked the empath's preference. Thera's eyes widened slightly, her composure cracking for just a moment. When she spoke, her voice was like wind through crystal chimes. I would choose freedom, she said simply. Sarah nodded, then reached out and touched the ceremonial bonds. They dissolved at her command. Earth's technology had long since learned to interface with Nixian systems. The liquid metal slithered away, leaving Thera's wrists bare for the first time in years. This is unprecedented, Vaxil protested, but there was uncertainty in his tone. The consequences will be significant, Sarah finished for him. Change usually is. She turned to leave, gesturing for Thera to follow if she wished. The empath took a step forward, then another, each movement becoming more confident. As they walked through the embassy's twisting corridors toward the Earth shuttle, Sarah could feel the weight of what she'd just done settling on her shoulders. She'd effectively challenged centuries of Nixian tradition and possibly threatened the alliance between their species. But watching Thera walk beside her, head held high for the first time, Sarah knew she'd made the right choice. They will not let this stand, Thera said softly as they approached the shuttle. My people believe structure and tradition are what separate us from chaos. And what do you believe? Sarah asked, pausing at the shuttle's entrance. Thera touched her bare wrists, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I believe I'm about to find out. The shuttle door sealed behind them with a soft hiss. As they lifted off from Centauri Prime, Sarah watched the crystalline city recede beneath them. She'd been sent here to strengthen the alliance between Earth and the Nixian Empire. Instead, She'd sparked what might become the biggest diplomatic crisis in recent history. But looking at Thera, who sat with perfect posture while her eyes devoured every detail of the shuttle's interior, with barely contained wonder, Sarah couldn't bring herself to regret it. Humanity had fought too long against its own history of oppression to perpetuate it among the stars. "Commander," Thera's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "The emotions you felt in there, the anger, the disgust at my treatment, they were genuine." "Of course they were. Among my people, it is considered sophisticated to hide one's true feelings beneath layers of courtesy. Yet you humans," she paused, searching for words, "you burn so brightly with what you believe." Sarah smiled slightly. "That's both our greatest strength and our biggest diplomatic challenge." She turned to face Thera fully. "I meant what I said. You're free to make your own choices now. If you want to be dropped at any neutral port, that can be arranged." Thera was quiet for a long moment, her silver eyes distant. "I would like to stay," she finally said. "I want to understand this human way of thinking that values freedom over tradition, compassion over protocol." "It won't be easy," Sarah warned. "What happened down there will have consequences. For both of us." "I know." Thera's expression hardened with determination. "But for the first time in my life, I'm choosing those consequences for myself." As the shuttle broke atmosphere, leaving the purple skies of Centauri Prime behind, Sarah realized this was only the beginning. She challenged more than just a tradition today. She challenged an entire way of thinking. The real test would be what came next. But looking at Thera, seeing the spark of hope and defiance in her eyes, Sarah knew that whatever storms were coming, they would face them together. Because that was the human way, not to accept injustice, but to fight it, not to bow to tradition, but to forge new paths. The stars stretched out before them, infinite possibilities in the void. Sarah engaged the FTL drive, and they left Centauri Prime behind in a flash of light, carrying with them the seeds of change that would shake two civilizations to their core. Breaking chains. The observation deck of the EDF Hyperion hung suspended among the stars, its transparent walls giving the illusion of floating in space. Thera pressed her hand against the cool surface, watching distant nebulae paint the void in swirls of purple and blue. After 2 weeks aboard the human vessel, the wonder of it still hadn't faded. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Sarah's voice came from behind her. "No matter how many times I see it, space never loses its magic." Thera turned, noting how the commander had traded her formal uniform for standard EDF fatigues. In the short time they'd known each other, she'd learned that humans valued this kind of casual efficiency. It was yet another contrast to the rigid formality of Nixian society. "I've been reading about Earth's history," Thera said, gesturing to the datapad in her hand, "about something called the abolition movement. Your people fought wars over this concept of freedom." Sarah moved to stand beside her, their reflections ghostly in the transparent walls. "We did. Multiple times, across different continents and eras. The idea that one sentient being could own another, it's left deep scars in our collective consciousness. That explains the crew's reactions to me," Thera observed. She'd felt their emotions clearly enough: confusion, anger on her behalf, and a fierce protectiveness that still surprised her. "They treat me as an equal, even though I'm not human." "That's not despite you being alien, Thera. It's because you're sentient. You think, you feel, you dream. For us, that's enough." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's systems. But Thera could sense the undercurrent of tension in Sarah's emotions, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "There's news from Earth Command, isn't there?" Sarah sighed, running a hand through her short black hair. "They're not happy. The Nixian Empire has filed a formal protest, claiming I violated their cultural sovereignty. Some politicians are pushing for my removal from command." "Because of me?" Thera's voice was quiet. "No." Sarah's response was sharp, immediate. "Because of their own political cowardice. because it's easier to maintain the status quo than to stand up for what's right. She turned to face Thera fully. I don't regret what I did. Not for a second. Before Thera could respond, the ship's AI chimed softly. Commander, priority transmission from Earth Command. Sarah straightened, Commander's mask sliding back into place. Put it through to my quarters. Thera, would you join me? You should hear this too. The walk to Sarah's quarters was brief but tense. Inside, the holographic projection of Admiral Santos materialized, his weathered face grave. Commander Chen, we have a situation. The Nixian embassy on Mars has reported increased activity among their empath servants. There have been incidents. They're refusing orders, demanding equal treatment. Your actions have sparked something. Thera felt Sarah's surge of emotions, concern mixed with a fierce kind of pride. Are the empaths being punished? The Nixians are trying, but Earth law prohibits physical discipline of sentient beings. It's causing quite the diplomatic headache. Santos' image flickered. There's more. We've received encrypted transmissions from within the Nixian Empire. Other empaths are watching what's happening. They're beginning to question their place in society. Good, Sarah said firmly. It's about time. Commander, Santos' voice held a warning. The Nixian Empire is one of our strongest allies. This situation needs to be contained before it destabilizes our relationship. With respect, Admiral, maybe that relationship needs some destabilizing. We can't claim to stand for freedom and justice while turning a blind eye to institutionalized slavery. Thera stepped forward, speaking before she could stop herself. Admiral, if I may, what's happening isn't just about me or Commander Chen. It's about a truth that can't be contained, that freedom is a fundamental right, regardless of species. Santos studied her for a long moment. You speak well for someone who was property 2 weeks ago. I speak well because I was never property. Thera's silver eyes flashed. I was enslaved. There's a difference. A ghost of a smile crossed the Admiral's face. Commander Chen, your presence is requested at Earth Command for a formal hearing. Bring Thera. Her testimony could be crucial. After the transmission ended, Sarah turned to Thera. Are you ready for this? Speaking at the hearing means putting yourself in the spotlight. The Nixian Empire won't take it lightly. Thera thought of the other empaths, of the spark of defiance spreading among her people. In the histories I read, change never comes easily. But it comes all the same, doesn't it? That it does, Sarah smiled. That it does. As they plotted their course for Earth, Thera returned to the observation deck. The stars seemed different now, not just beautiful, but full of promise. Her people had a saying. Tradition is the anchor that keeps us steady. But perhaps, she thought, some anchors were meant to be lifted, some chains meant to be broken. The Hyperion's engines hummed to life, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, a revolution was beginning to stir. Rising storm. Earth's gleaming spaceport stood in stark contrast to the crystalline architecture Thera had known all her life. As she and Sarah descended from the Hyperion, a crowd of reporters pressed against the security barriers, their cameras and recording devices creating a storm of flashing lights. Breaking news. The empath who sparked an interstellar crisis. Commander Chen, is Earth preparing for potential conflict with the Nixian Empire? Are you advocating for a complete overhaul of the tribute system? Sarah guided Thera through the chaos with a protective hand on her shoulder, neither of them responding to the barrage of questions. But Thera could feel the electricity in the air, not just from the reporters, but from the gathered crowd. Hope, fear, anger, support. The emotions washed over her empathic senses in waves. The Earth Defense Force headquarters rose before them, a towering structure of steel and smart glass that adapted to the sunlight. Inside, the atmosphere was no less charged, though the chaos was better contained. Officers and diplomats watched them pass, their emotions carefully schooled but leaking through nonetheless. Admiral Santos met them in a private conference room, his expression grim. The situation has escalated. We've received reports of widespread unrest in the Nixian outer colonies. Empaths are refusing their duties, citing Earth's protection of individual rights. They're refusing peacefully, Sarah asked, taking a seat at the large table. So far. But the Nixian authorities are not known for their patience. He activated a holographic display, showing footage from various colonies. Thera's heart clenched at the sight of her people gathering in quiet protest, their skin patterns flickering with determination. The Nixian High Council has issued an ultimatum, Santos continued. Either we return Thera and publicly affirm the legitimacy of their tribute system, or they'll consider it an act of hostile cultural interference. They can't seriously expect us to comply. Sarah's voice was steel. Some in Earth's government think we should. Santos' words fell heavy in the room. The Nixian Empire controls key trade routes and resources. A conflict with them could devastate our economy. Thera stood, her voice clear and steady. May I speak? Santos nodded, and a holographic display shifted to show the chamber where her testimony would be heard later that day. The seats were already filling with diplomats and officials from both Earth and the Empire. For generations, my people have been told that our empathic abilities make us different, that we need to be controlled, guided, owned. She touched the spot where her bonds had once been. But what's happening now isn't about trade routes or resources. It's about recognizing that difference doesn't justify dominance. A new alert flashed across the display. Santos's face darkened as he read it. The Nixian fleet is mobilizing. They're claiming it's a routine exercise. But they're sending a message. Sarah finished. She turned to Thera. Are you sure you want to go through with the testimony? Once you speak, there's no going back. Thera closed her eyes, reaching out with her empathic senses. Beyond the room, beyond the building, she could feel the pulse of Earth. Billions of humans, each one different, each one free. The sensation was intoxicating after a lifetime of rigid control. Commander Chen showed me that being different doesn't mean being less. She opened her eyes, meeting Sarah's gaze. My testimony might spark a conflict, but staying silent definitely condemns my people to continued slavery. The chamber was packed when they entered. Nixian diplomats sat on one side, their skin patterns rippling with barely contained fury. Earth's representatives occupied the other, their emotions a complex mix of determination and uncertainty. As Thera took her place at the podium, a familiar figure caught her eye. High Minister Vaxil had come personally, his presence a clear indication of how seriously the Empire took this threat to their way of life. Honored representatives, Thera began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I stand before you not as property to be traded, but as a free being speaking your truth. The tribute system isn't about honor or tradition. It's about control. About keeping empaths dependent and subservient because our abilities frighten those in power. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Vaxil's patterns flashed warning colors, but Thera continued. But Commander Chen showed me something powerful. That true strength comes not from controlling others, but from helping them grow. From recognizing that diversity, whether it's between humans or between species, is something to be celebrated, not feared. She felt Sarah's pride radiating from where she sat, giving her strength to continue. The empaths who are standing up now aren't doing so because Earth corrupted them. They're doing it because Earth showed them what's possible, showed them that being different doesn't mean being enslaved. Suddenly, every screen in the chamber lit up with new footage. On dozens of Nixian worlds, empaths were removing their bonds, standing in silent protest. The chamber erupted in chaos. This is sedition. Vaxil rose, his patterns blazing. You have corrupted our sacred traditions with your human notions of freedom. No, Thera's voice cut through the noise. We've awakened to the truth that tradition without justice is just oppression with a prettier name. As the chamber descended into heated debate, Sarah made her way to Thera's side. Whatever comes next, she said quietly, Earth stands with you. Thera nodded, watching as her words rippled out across the galaxy, carrying with them the promise of change and the threat of storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The time for diplomacy was ending. The time for choosing sides was beginning. And in the space between stars, both humanity and the Nixian Empire would have to decide what they truly stood for. The revolution's spark. The emergency alert blared through the Hyperion's corridors as Sarah raced to the bridge, Thera close behind. The ship's holographic displays were already active, showing multiple Nixian warships dropping out of FTL near Earth's outer defense perimeter. Status report. Sarah barked, sliding into her command chair. 12 Nixian dreadnoughts, Commander, her XO reported. They're claiming this is a peacekeeping force to protect their diplomatic interests. Admiral Santos is attempting communication. Thera stepped forward, her silver eyes fixed on the tactical display. Those are Sovereign-class vessels. They're only deployed for major military operations. Some peacekeeping force, Sarah muttered. The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, but she could feel the tension in the air. The Nixian Empire had never brought military vessels this close to Earth. Admiral Santos' hologram materialized on the bridge. Commander Chen, the situation has deteriorated. We've received reports of Nixian authorities attempting to forcibly suppress empath protests across their territories. There have been casualties. Thera's hands clenched at her sides, her skin patterns flickering with distress. Sarah wanted to comfort her but maintained her professional demeanor. What are our orders, Admiral? The Earth Defense Council has authorized defensive measures. The Hyperion is to join the protective fleet around Earth. But, Commander, Santos' image flickered. We're walking a razor's edge here. One wrong move could start a war. With respect, Admiral, I think the Nixians have already made their move. Sarah gestured to the tactical display. Those aren't peace ships. The transmission ended, and Sarah turned to her crew. Battle stations, shields at maximum. I want weapons hot but locked. We don't fire unless fired upon. As klaxons sounded throughout the ship, Thera stepped closer to Sarah's chair. I can feel them, she whispered. The empaths on those ships. They're afraid, confused. The Nixian commanders are pushing them to use their abilities as weapons. Sarah's jaw tightened. Can you communicate with them? Not directly, but Thera closed her eyes, concentrating. I can project emotions. Let them know they're not alone. Do it, Sarah ordered. But be careful. We don't know how they'll react. The next few hours were a tense standoff. Earth's defense fleet moved into position, matching the Nixian formation. On the tactical displays, more ships arrived from both sides, the space around Earth becoming increasingly crowded. Then something unexpected happened. Commander, the sensor officer called out. We're detecting unauthorized shuttle launches from 3 of the Nixian vessels. The tactical display showed small craft breaking away from the dreadnoughts, heading toward Earth. Nixian weapons targeted the shuttles, but didn't fire. It's the empaths. Thera's voice was filled with wonder. They're defecting. They felt my message, felt the possibility of freedom, and they're choosing to leave. Sarah made a split-second decision. Open our shuttle bays. Signal the other Earth ships to do the same. We're granting emergency asylum to any empaths who reach our lines. The bridge erupted in controlled chaos as shuttle after shuttle broke away from the Nixian fleet. Some made it through immediately, while others had to be protected by Earth fighters as they crossed the gap between the fleets. Nixian flagship is powering weapons. The tactical officer shouted. Hold position, Sarah ordered. Shields maximum. We are not firing first. The tension stretched to breaking point, and then something remarkable happened. More alarms sounded, but this time from the Nixian side. Their dreadnoughts' weapons powered down, their systems seemingly going haywire. Thera laughed, a sound of pure joy. The empaths still on their ships. They're fighting back. They're using their abilities to disrupt the weapon systems. The Nixian fleet hung in space, paralyzed by internal chaos as more shuttles broke free. Sarah watched in amazement as the supposedly mighty warships were rendered helpless by their own property. "Commander," her communications officer called out. "We're receiving a transmission from one of the shuttles. They say they have High Minister Vaxil's son aboard. He helped them escape." Sarah turned to Thera, whose eyes were wide with surprise. "It seems your testimony affected more than just empaths," she said softly. The next few hours were a blur of activity as Earth ships coordinated the rescue operation. Hundreds of empaths were brought aboard, each with their own story of awakening, of choosing freedom over tradition. And among them was young Vaxil, who stood proud despite his father's name. "I couldn't watch it anymore," he told Sarah and Thera in the Hyperion's conference room. "Growing up, I never questioned our traditions. But seeing you stand up, seeing the courage of these empaths, how could I stay silent?" As the Nixian fleet finally retreated, unable to maintain control of their ships or justify firing on their own people, Sarah found Thera on the observation deck again. "It's not over," Thera said, watching the stars. "The Empire won't give up easily. There will be consequences." "There already are consequences," Sarah replied. "But they're not what the Empire expected." She gestured to the ships around them, now filled with free empaths. "You didn't just start a revolution, Thera. You started an evolution." Thera turned to her, silver eyes bright. "We started it, humans and empaths together. That's what frightens them most. Not that we might be free, but that we might work together as equals." As if to emphasize her point, alerts began coming in from across Nixian space. More protests, more defections, more calls for change. The spark had become a flame, and no amount of tradition could smother it now. The revolution wasn't just about empaths anymore. It was about every being's right to choose their own path. And as Sarah watched Thera begin organizing the rescued empaths, she knew that the real battle, the battle for hearts and minds, was only just beginning. But for the first time, it felt like victory was possible, not through weapons or warfare, but through the simple, unstoppable power of people choosing to be free. A new dawn. 3 months after the mass defection at Earth, the great hall of the interstellar conclave hummed with anticipation. Representatives from 100 worlds gathered to witness something unprecedented: peace negotiations between the Nixian Empire and the newly formed Empath Coalition. Sarah stood at parade rest near the Earth delegation, watching Thera prepare to address the assembly. Gone were the ceremonial bonds and submissive posture of her past. Today, she wore a dignified blend of Earth and Nixian styling, her natural luminescence enhanced by confidence. "The past quarter cycle has seen unprecedented change," Thera began, her voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. "The Nixian Empire has lost 40% of its empath population to emigration. Their economy struggles without the empathic services they took for granted. But today we offer a path forward." High Minister Vaxil sat with the Nixian delegation, his son beside him. The younger Vaxil had become a crucial bridge between the old guard and the reformers, his active conscience inspiring others within the Empire's elite to question their traditions. "We propose a new accord," Thera continued, "one that recognizes empaths as free citizens with protected rights throughout Nixian space. In return, we offer our voluntary cooperation in maintaining the economic and social bonds that have always connected our peoples." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Sarah could see the calculations happening behind every delegate's eyes. The Nixian Empire had already tried military intervention, only to discover that ships crewed by unwilling empaths were worse than useless. They'd tried economic sanctions, only to find that their own economy suffered more. Furthermore, Thera's voice strengthened. Earth has agreed to share its adaptive technology, allowing for the integration of empathic abilities with ship systems through choice rather than coercion. This will enhance rather than diminish our combined strength. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. That had been a masterstroke, offering the Empire a way to save face while fundamentally transforming their relationship with empaths. Ships would still have empathic crews, but as honored professionals, not slaves. High Minister Vaxil rose to speak, his skin patterns showing complex emotions. 3 months ago, I would have called this proposal blasphemy. But we have seen what becomes of an empire that refuses to evolve. He turned to face his son, then Thera. The Nixian Empire accepts these terms in principle, pending final negotiation of details. The chamber erupted in surprised conversation. Sarah caught Thera's eye across the room, sharing a moment of triumph. But they both knew that paper agreements were only the beginning. Later, in a quiet garden outside the conclave hall, Sarah found Thera watching the sunset. "You did it," she said simply. "We did it," Thera corrected. "Humanity showed us it was possible. You showed me it was possible." She turned to Sarah with a slight smile. "Though I doubt this is what Earth Command had in mind when they sent you on a diplomatic mission." Sarah laughed. "Probably not. But sometimes the best diplomacy is simply doing what's right and dealing with the consequences." Speaking of consequences, Thera's expression grew serious. "The Coalition has asked me to serve as their representative to Earth. It seems I've developed a unique perspective on human-Nixian relations." "Oh." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them I needed to consult my friend first. The human commander who started all this by refusing to accept a gift of property." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Each point of light represented possibilities now, not just for empaths and humans, but for all species who might learn from what had happened here. "You know," Sarah said thoughtfully, "Earth Command has been talking about establishing a new diplomatic corps, one specifically focused on cultural exchange and rights advocacy across species." She turned to Thera. "They'll need people who understand both sides, people who've lived the change they want to create." Thera's skin patterns shifted in a way Sarah had learned to recognize as hope. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe this isn't the end of our story. Maybe it's just the beginning of a new chapter." As night fell over the conclave, the two women continued planning. Above them, ships from dozens of species crossed the stars freely, carrying with them the seeds of change that had started with one simple act of defiance. The universe was vast and full of old traditions, outdated beliefs, and chains yet to be broken. But now there was proof that change was possible, that freedom, once tasted, could transform not just individuals but entire civilizations. And somewhere in the grand chambers of the interstellar conclave, the final words of the new accord were being written. "All sentient beings, regardless of species or ability, are born free and equal in dignity and rights." It wasn't just a human idea anymore. It was becoming a universal truth, one star system at a time. The end.